Good evening, Budweiser staff. My name is Luke Anderson, current student at the University of Arizona Global Campus in Business 330 Principles of Marketing. Today, I'm going to be going over the fact that I am an intern with this lovely company and America's greatest beer. We're going to discuss the Australia market and why the actors and forces are potentially not really aligning correctly in terms of our growth in that specific area. So, what we got? Actors in a microeconomic environment. Actors in a microeconomic environment include individuals who affect the company's ability to serve its customers. Many of these immediate actors in a microenvironment have the ability to make quick decisions to further its sales. AKA, we're looking at stakeholders, managers, employees, board members, even suppliers in general. This includes liaisons, essentially, especially in a market like Australia, where we have states spread across an entire continent. We need to have people that are there ready to make the decision to essentially maximize the sales when needed. Well, on top of that, we also have a customer market. Consumers, as they're enjoying the product, are also going to, by word of mouth, promote the brand, either positively or negatively. And you got to understand that some of these people might actually also be working either for the company or some of its competitors. So you need to consider the fact that resellers are a big part of that. And anyone that's running for political areas, understand that the government itself is going to play a fact in some of its customer markets. That's right. So, moving on. Forces in the microeconomic environment. These are strategic moves that directly impact the company's success. Company groups essentially are current brands and their established loyal base. We know that companies like Coopers and some of the three other major brands that have been in this country itself for the past 150 years, they have a pretty loyal base there. And up until about 10, 15 years ago, did it really start to change where the Japanese foothold in Australia started to make kind of a big difference. But in terms of the micro level, partnerships that promote the American flavor. So Budweiser, people in the U.S. love the taste. How can we keep that type of fan base growing positively in a foreign country? Way to do that, also you need to look at changes with the consumer behavior, aka what type of social media impact do we have with the company? Are we making the best efforts to ensure that we have a connection with our customer base? Are we listening to what they want? Are they making demands on the social media that maybe that's something that we can effectively change? And we can do things like wish list. Find some of the top 3 repeating things that we're seeing in our customer base and try to make one of those happen. Know your customer. One of the most important things you have to do. Moving on to a bigger picture, we got the actors in the macro environment. Essentially, these could be leaders who anticipate and plan for the influence of the macro environment, aka cultural, political, technology. Things that we always are worried about is the fact that, well, we want to import products to this company or to this country. There's quite a big tax that's associated with that. The other problem with that is in Australia itself, one of their biggest issues is that making beer in Australia is taxed just as much as importing the beer. The government in 2019 brought $3.6 billion in beer tax alone. That would be a huge hit on almost any type of company trying to make a profit. So a lot of these times, the customer base is going to rely on the tastes that have been around for a while, aka 150 years with Coopers, or even Carlton United, who's once used to be an Australian-owned beer and is now owned by the Japanese company of Kirin. Moving on, forces in the macro environment area. These are the things that impact the company on a large scale. So technology, what type of canning, bottling, packaging, shipping type of machinery we're using. Is it getting outdated? Is it time for an upgrade? Is Budweiser going to invest more money in Australia to improve its partnership with its breweries? Or are we going to focus more on bringing our imports in to essentially maximize sales somewhere? Looking at existing formulas versus new formulas. I know that there was a failed attempt at an IPA recently, and that involved Anheuser-Busch selling over 11 billion essentially to Kirin. So there's that. But I think there's things we can learn from that whole process. So looking at facility updates, and then going back and comparing a U.S. market and the Australian market. The Australian market, as you'll see here in the next slide, they have had a much lower intake of alcohol compared to the U.S. I mean, let's see here. With an already declining percentage of beer consumption, roughly 20% decrease per capita in the past decade, beer consumption is 60% lower than it was at its peak in 1975, according to Shown 2021. If you add that with the COVID experience that we just had in 2019, which dropped another 10 to 13%, we have this declining process where people are trying to, they want to enjoy the beer, but they don't want it. So maybe they look at alternatives. Australia has been one of the leading countries that has been gravitating to more alcoholic-free drinks. BBC News reports that major Australian brewers are reporting an explosion in the popularity of non-alcoholic beer. That's a market that I think we could probably capitalize on. And if you going down the list here, customer preference, know your customer. This is where I think we can actually make positive gains, kind of like how the market has gravitated to a lot of seltzers that you see across all countries. So, taking that into to consideration, that'll lead to increased stocks because, just Anheuser alone, when they sold their product to Kirin, they said there was a 4.6% increase in revenue in stocks for Kirin. And that's because the people who already lived in Australia knew that the prices weren't going to change much, and people gravitated to wanting to support those bottles more, even though that Anheuser just basically sold their stock. So just some things that we can consider, and especially as technology goes on. I'd say that in the end, as long as we have a foothold in the Australian market, we have the potential to use social media and our outstanding advertising techniques to ensure success. We can be a good success story like these two. Again, I'm Luke Anderson, and that was the Budweiser Australia micro and macro environment factors. Thank you.